Hello YouTube and welcome back. This is my first build that I've done for the 1.1 refresh event. During this event here, we've got like extra drops, we've got bonus monsters appearing in the monolith system. We have extra difficulty of monsters, some transfusion caskets that have been showing up, dealing a little bit more damage than people were prepared for at the beginning of this 1.1 refresh event. And it's been a little bit more fun than I thought it was going to be. Like, I had a lot of good things to say about the event. Yes, I wish there were bug fixes. I wish that there were balance changes. I wish that the release cycle for Last Epoch didn't take quite so long. But those things set aside for just a moment here, I'm impressed that this event has been quite a bit of fun to play around with. So the build that I tried, I wanted something that had lots of clear speed. And I went into this event thinking that I wanted to try out something with explosive trap plus acid flask. The only thing that I've done with this in the past is building a spark charge blade dancer, which, while awesome, and I really enjoyed it, I wouldn't have recommended it in the past because of the meme-worthy gearing for that build. And also, I wouldn't recommend it in the future because the low-life blade dancer node got changed from being flat critical strike chance to crit multi. So, that said, I wanted to play something with acid flask, and my intent was to play it as a blade dancer. And at the very last moment, when I was ready to click my mastery, Twitch chat said, "Hey, you know what? You haven't played a Falconer yet, Perry. Why don't you try a Falconer instead?" And really, that was the beginning of the end for this build. A lot of my critique of Falconer builds in the past have been that it's hard to make a bad Falconer, and all of your decisions seem to be made for you. Where, like, instead of you having a problem and you need to fix it in some particular way, it just seems like all of your problems have already been fixed, and that's Falconer. It's just very strong out of the box. After playing with the Falconer a little bit right now, we started out with a explosive trap plus acid flask build. I didn't realize that the Trop House node that gives you extra traps thrown got nerfed to have a +3 mana cost on it now. The mana cost was kind of annoying the entire time, and I never quite got to the point of fixing the mana. And I think the build that Dread put out on YouTube, highlighting a community build from someone named DOSH2O, I think that would be the way to go about fixing the mana, by the way. But I digress. My point is, I started out wanting to play as a explosive trap plus acid flask build. That was my intent. That's what I wanted to do. And I found these horrible, good for nothing, awful boots. They're called Razorfall, and they have text on them, which is exactly my problem with all of Falconer. It just seems like these boots are way too strong. They are so good, and as soon as you put them on, you realize that they're going to, in an insidious fashion, kind of take over your entire build. One of my critiques of not only Falconer, but Umbral Blades builds in the past is that as soon as you put Umbral Blades in your build, you start wondering, oh man, these Umbral Blades deal so much damage, I wish I could have more of them, and then you just become an Umbral Blades build as if by accident. That's also very similar to how I feel about, wait for it, Shadow Daggers, because as soon as you put Shadow Daggers in your build, you just start thinking, oh man, what if this other skill applied Shadow Daggers too? I could take this Shadow Dagger node, and then I could take that Shadow Dagger node, and they really just kind of infest your build. So I've got these three mechanics of being a Falconer, of being a Shadow Dagger build, of being an Umbral Blades build, and they kind of took my build in a direction that I didn't mean for it to take. So I ended up playing a life-based Falconer, Shadow Dagger, Umbral Blades, Razorfall build. And I want to shout out Lone Star McFluffin. He is a member of the Max Roll team. He has been playing Shadow Daggers literally longer than I've been playing this game, and he's a big Shadow Dagger enjoyer. The build that he has up on the Max Roll side looks good, looks like a pretty stock standard build. He's got some, totally reasonable decisions made there. What I will say is that if any version of these 1.1 refresh monsters persist into the core of Last Epoch, man, I do not want to dual wield. I 1000% want a shield. I do not want to be taking percent increased damage, and I do want some extra survivability from having a shield. You could try this as like an acid flask build with either dual wielding with a bunch of mana regeneration or having the offhand with the acid flask thing, the cold conversion acid flask. But I don't even think the cold conversion acid flask is where you want to be. I think if you're doing the acid flask thing, then you still want to be dual wielding to get all those mana regeneration affixes. Again, I digress. digressing is almost the name of this build. Where like I wanted to be doing one thing. I wanted to play Explosive Trap Acid Flask, and I ended up just, having to use these things that are just too strong not to use. So I'll tell you about the last direction that I wanted to take this build before I tell you what exactly we ended up with here, which of course is Shadow Dagger Falconer. The last thing that we had the idea was I wanted to perhaps take Umbral Blades in a different direction instead of being Shadow Daggers, which to me is kind of boring. They've been around for a long time and I don't really enjoy building it. I wanted to say, like, what if Umbral Blades themselves did damage? And there's two ways that you can go about that, either with bleed or some kind of ailment, taking advantage of the more multipliers in the tree, because of course, as Umbral Blades, Shadow Daggers don't inherit more multipliers. You know that already. You're very smart. The other option would be Umbral Blades crit. So there's a way that we could go about playing an Umbral Blades crit build, and I just hinted at a minute ago by saying that I did not want to be a dual wield character, because you could use a dual wield setup using the new Trader's Tongue unique dagger in your offhand. So of course, Rogue is the only class in the game that can offhand a dagger, so you can have plus 13 critical strike chance with this equipped in your offhand, and then it gives you plus to skills as well. This is obviously a awesome offhand to be able to use if you can fix your survivability. I really don't think you want to be putting something in your offhand. You are pretty squishy. Maybe Blade Dancer could get away with something like that, because Blade Dancer has a little bit extra defense. But even that setup, again, if these new monsters from the refresh event, especially the things like the transfusion casket, I think is the name of that new elite monster. If that persists in Last Epoch, I really think you want some extra durability, or you want enough damage to like literally never engage with anything. But if you're literally never engaging with something, you're going to have a hard time when you get to Harbingers and boss fights, because you're not going to be able to bypass those encounters. You're going to need to survive something. So my experience with this build as a whole has been that perhaps this character as a Falconer, as a Shadow Dagger, as like a very zoomy aerial assault resetting kind of build, I think this build perhaps is the character that I've died most on in my entire experience in Last Epoch. That might not be true, but it's definitely close to being true if it's not. It's not a good streamer build. It's a phrase that I use periodically to describe something that allows me to read Twitch chat at the same time, because that's something that I personally like to do. I like to have builds that are automated in some way, or that have auto aim or good recovery, or can take a hit or have some good defense to them. And this build, a lot of the defense from this build comes from having maneuverability of your character. I can reset this, reset my aerial assault. I can lower the cooldown by poking things with the last line of text on these things. In any case, it's very zoomy build, but it's definitely not something that was easy to play. If I wanted to play this at a good level and I wanted to, not die, I definitely had to be paying attention the whole time, which is tedious, especially for me as someone who streams on Twitch. So the other thing that I wanted to mention in this regard is, again, jumping around. I found the aerial assault being stuck in the animation of jumping around to be a big downside more often than once. So, this aerial assault thing, it kind of reminds me of Runic Invocation as a Rune Master, having that animation that just kind of locks you in place. And they recently made it a little bit faster, but you're still kind of stuck in place for it. So I found myself periodically dying, a few times, because my aerial assault had me like landing in a damage over time area, and I just like took 2 or 3 ticks of damage over time from it, and I would die, just like, instantly obliterated. So that didn't feel great, but I don't know. Listen, it actually kind of felt like Dancing Strikes. Imagine that Dancing Strikes was like, I don't know, a better skill, or something that you weren't kind of sheepish or embarrassed to admit that you were playing. But Dancing Strikes, aerial assault, getting all the resets and cooldowns and using your evade button to jump around, this literally feels a little bit like Dancing Strike because you have the forced movement of the aerial assault button there. There's a couple thoughts on the build. I didn't end up enjoying it too much. I didn't really enjoy that my decisions were being made for me, that I wanted to play one build, but I felt like I was forced to play another build because these Razorfall boots are so flipping strong. I wanted to play like a DPS, like a crit DPS Umbral Blades build, But to get that, I needed to like dual wield, because the dual wielding is a good way of getting flat critical strike chance, because there's no flat critical strike chance in Umbral Blades. And just getting 4% increased critical strike chance as a implicit from my main hand weapon isn't going to be enough for me to get like, 80 or 90, I guess 80 critical strike chance on Umbral Blades to crit cap off of crit vulnerability. So that's a direction that I would have been enjoying taking it as well, like stacking up Dust Shrouds perhaps, and then using the 4x1 idol that says like damage per Dust Shroud, or increased damage per Dust Shroud for Umbral Blades. That's something that I would have been interested in, but I think it's just a lot of work. The other version, of course, of playing Umbral Blades as a DPS build without playing Shadow Daggers, and again, addressing the issue of not having access to flat critical strike chance in the tree itself, is Bleed. And basically this exact setup with like Umbral Blades, Puncture, Falconry, Aerial Assault, probably all the same skills, wouldn't you do this? Playing this as a Bleed setup as well, I think is like a pretty reasonable direction to take it. I didn't fully explore it, but I kind of poked around with it. And like, it seems like it has, appropriate ways of building damage and whatnot. So I don't know if you'd still go spinny, I don't know if you'd still go explodey Umbral Blades at that point, or just spinny and have them continuing on the ground. But the explosions seem pretty good, just because we're generating so many of them. So for our build, the last thing that I'll say about this is we got up to 112 dexterity, which means that after we're using our flippy, we have 6 explosions going off. If we got to 120, we would have 8 explosions going off, and then 8 explosions, if they're all hitting, should be... Well, I don't know if all the Umbral Blades are going to be getting like their first tick, and like sometimes they don't tick because it's only a 60% chance of applying Shadow Daggers off of this node here. You should be getting 2 or maybe 3 pops of a Shadow Dagger if you have 120 dexterity. So what's the big takeaway? Should you play this build? If you care about killing bosses, I would not. I really do not think that this particular setup, focusing all your damage on Razorfall, is a good place to be in terms of single target damage. And single target damage, quite frankly, is more important than it's ever been in the past in Last Epoch. If you want to have fun and get to level 100 before you even realize that you've gotten that far, and just like blast monsters, and you can probably take this to 1,000 corruption. I'm not doubting that at all. Your gear is gonna be better than mine if you're playing it for more than just like a day or two. This build is extremely fun to play. The moment-to-moment gameplay of this build is extremely enjoyable. Building this build, making decisions about what goes where, being thoughtful about my masteries or my points here, very boring. That's not the reason that I come to Last Epoch to make a build. I like finding new things and poking around and making my own decisions. But Falconer and Umbral Blades and Shadow Daggers and even these extremely powerful new boots, Razorfall, that just got introduced in past 1.1, these things are just like, they're so strong and like they're so linear in terms of building them that for me, that's not the reason that I play the game. So I found my interest waning in this build. I am going to move on. I have other things that I want to play in patch 1.1. If this is your favorite build, I wouldn't bat an eye. I'm sure that people love this, and I know that there's a reason that Shadow Daggers and even Falconer, both in their own right, are fan favorites. I stayed away from Falconer, and I've stayed away from Shadow Daggers for a while, and now I've done both of those things in one build, and it reminds me that this is just not the reason that I play the game. It's fun. It's fun blowing up monsters, but that's not the kind of fun that I want to have. Let's move on. Let's go play something else. I'll see you next time.